Thank you, Governor Thompson. That was really terrific, and the panel, very enlightening. Now we have a sort of the flip side of that, and this is how to align stakeholders in order to build a regenerative care model. And that will be led by Ted Tenthoff, who's the Managing Director and Senior Research Analyst at the investment bank and asset management firm Piper Jaffray. Please welcome Edward Ted Tenthoff.
Thank you, Max. Good morning, everyone. My name is Edward Tenthoff, and I'm a Managing Director and Senior Biotechnology Analyst at Piper Jaffray. As Max mentioned, Piper Jaffray is a U.S. investment bank focused on healthcare and a proud Silver Key sponsor of this year's event. Before I begin, I do just want to take a second to thank and congratulate Robin and everyone at STEM for Life for organizing such an important and amazing event. I really do believe that the growth of this conference over the last 3 years reflects the incredible progress that's being made in the field. I'd also like to thank His Holiness Pope Francis, His Eminence Cardinal Ravasi, and Monsignor Trafny for sponsoring the event, and for everyone at the Vatican for their gracious hospitality. So over the last few days, we've heard quite a bit about the promising research that's taking place in the field. Following up on our last discussion, our panel is entitled Aligning Stakeholders to Build a Regenerative Care Model. And I am joined by two leaders in the field, Dr. Andre Terzic and also C. Randal Mills, PhD. Andre is a world-renowned cardiologist and pioneer in the use of stem cell therapy to treat heart disease. He presently serves as the director of the Mayo Clinic Center for Regenerative Medicine and professor in cardiovascular disease research. Mayo was opened actually in 1889. So this important hospital has been treating patients for over 125 years and is really working to create comprehensive regenerative care model that leverages the learning to treat a wide variety of diseases. Andre is an inventor of a cell therapy product called CIRM, which is currently in a phase 3 heart failure trial with data this summer. Dr. Terzic received his medical degree from the University of Belgrade and his PhD in pharmacology from the University of Illinois. Andre, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Also here with us today is my dear friend Randal Mills, who's the president and CEO of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. As many of you know, CIRM was established in 2004 with the passage of Proposition 71, or what's known as the California Stem Cell Research and Cures Act. This provided $3 billion in funding for stem cell research in the state of California at the time when the Bush administration was cutting national funding. Prior to his appointment at CIRM, Randy was the president and CEO of regenerative medicine company Osiris. And before that, Randy founded the University of Florida Tissue Bank and also served in several executive roles at RTI Biologics. Randy received his bachelor's degree in microbiology and a PhD in drug development from the University of Florida. Randy, thanks also for joining us. So, getting to the heart of this, several of the speakers have really touched on, but I'd really like to outline who are the key stakeholders in regenerative medicine. And I think one thing that's been very apparent, and one of the great things about this conference is that we actually get the voice of the patient. And I think really key and center in aligning stakeholders is the patients. The patients and the advocacy groups obviously want access to new curative therapies. The researchers certainly play an important role here advancing their science and careers. Doctors, their goal is to treat patients. Even industry, big pharma down to the smallest biotechs, while their goal is to make money, the way that they do that is by developing new therapies. The regulatory agencies, as we just heard, their goal truly is to approve safe and efficacious new drugs. The payers, reimbursement, their goal is to pay less for medicine, and I think cures plays a pivotal role in that. And even ultimately investors, which are the people that I usually have to deal with, while their goal is making money, the only way a biotech company or a big pharma company is going to make money is by developing new drugs, generating revenues, and translating that into a profit. So really, if you think about it, all of this centers around the patient, which is a really important thing to remember. So Andre, I'd like to start out and ask you to tell us a little bit about the efforts at Mayo Clinic. Randy, I'd love for you to chime in too and for this really to be more of a discussion, but where have we been successful in terms of aligning these interests between these different stakeholders?
Thank you very much. And again, to thank the organizer for this phenomenal opportunity to share opinions and experiences. I think the Mayo Clinic is just one example of many institutions worldwide that have embarked on regenerative medicine. And I think one of the key successes to date is, as a community, we have recognized the unmet needs of the patients. And I think that's a main driver. So regenerative medicine in many ways is for the patients, and it comes from the patients in many ways. And this is the model that the Mayo Clinic now for over a century has been using, the centrality of the patient, where patient is not only the recipient of care, but increasingly becomes the active component in defining the next frontier of medicine and surgery. I think the most amazing thing that just listening the last 2 days in this room has been the feeling that we're increasingly going beyond fighting for disease towards rebuilding health. And this concept of rebuilding health, I think, is a transformative concept for medicine. And if we take it further, we need to clearly build models of care that will fully recognize that opportunity. So regenerative medicine is used at Mayo Clinic as a differentiator and also as an enabler of driving the next generation solutions. That's really the essence of this field. So while we spend primarily during these 2 days focusing on the technologies, and you have seen an evolution of technologies and the success in technologies, what maybe in this panel we can discuss further is how we bring these technologies into ultimately pipelines that will lead to true service lines. So building a regenerative model of care is really an essence in building the service line for the well-being of the patients. I will stop here, and then through a discussion maybe we can develop it further.
Yeah, I mean, I just get to the heart of the question on how to align the various stakeholders. At CIRM, when I got to CIRM, I had a little bit of an unusual challenge in that the constitutionally mandated board for the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine has 29 members on it, and it's 29 of some of the most accomplished people in the world. They're deans of some of the most prestigious academic institutions and medical schools. They're industry heads. There are patient advocates involved. It's a very well-rounded out organization. But the one thing they aren't is they're not inherently aligned, and so that created some challenges at CIRM, where people there were people on the board that had different interests than other people on the board, than the leadership team at CIRM, and so on and so forth down through the organization. And the most important thing was to come up with a very clear, concise mission that everyone could understand and get behind. Now, CIRM actually does have a constitutionally mandated mission. It's like a paragraph long. I don't know what it is. But we also have a more abbreviated one that's 11 words, and I do know what that one is, and it's to accelerate stem cell treatments to patients with unmet medical needs. And I made a promise the day I started at CIRM was I was never ever going to give a presentation, not to the board, not to anyone, where I didn't start out saying those words and making it very, very clear. And at first I heard, yeah, you know, we're patient-centric. No, you can't say it once and forget about it. You can't put it. You can't take something like that and put it in the drawer and hope that your organization naturally and randomly finds its way there. Alignment is it takes work. It takes constant reinforcement. It takes making sure that the actions you do line up very specifically behind the words that you say. And I'm proud to say now that we actually. With this board of so many different opinions, again, very strong board. On December 17th, we enacted a new strategic plan at CIRM, and it's got some controversial pieces in it. It's not just all fluff. We really put in some challenging tasks for us, and that board of directors approved that plan 29-0. There was not a dissenting vote on it. And so, and I think that was just a result of no matter where we come from any different perspective on this, if we can't agree that the patient is what comes first and the patient is the first, middle, and last thing we're supposed to take care of, then we got a problem. But it's a pretty good rallying cry to get around.
So Randy, just picking up on that point, how really did you align these key stakeholders around that mission? Was it that the patient was just so important to everyone that people were able to get into alignment, or were there certain things either structurally or from an organizational basis or even a financial basis that you had to do to really achieve that alignment?
So you can't just say it. You do have to enact it structurally. And so however you go around doing your particular business, making sure that whether it's the way you contract or the way you, excuse me, write a grant or communicate to people, it all has to flow around the patient. And once it does, by the way, it takes work to get it aligned, but once it does, it's very, very difficult to unalign. When it's become your culture, you're going to be aligned for a while.
I think that's powerful. Andre, picking up on that same thought and what you were talking about with respect to Mayo building this comprehensive regenerative medicine center that's really, I think, core to what this panel is about. So how did Mayo get to that place in terms of really, again, aligning everyone to build this comprehensive model?
So when they asked me to chair it a few years back as an inaugural director, I think the main thing I complain is the term center. It looked like it was like an ivory coast, ivory tower of sort. And so I insisted that regenerative medicine should be diffused across all specialties. And essentially it is demonstrating that it's a next chapter of medical surgical specialties rather than a world on its own. And so we have built it initially as a blueprint. So you have heard throughout these 2 days about discovery, about translation, about application. So this is a so-called DTA model or a blueprint. But we are adding a new dimension, which is a build-out. How do you take, let's say, a regenerative product increasingly now from technology into manufacturing? You have heard about scaling it up, standardizing it, and ultimately, how do you deliver it to patients? So you have the DTA in, let's say, the x-axis and the technology manufacturing delivery in the y-axis, the blueprint versus the build-out. And what you get out of this composition is very clear regenerative portfolios, which are the regenerative products, the regenerative processes, and ultimately the service line. And as we mentioned, they built a model of care. But you also get what is a know-how very clearly, what is a know-how in this field, what is a proof of concept. And what was discussed in the previous panel, ultimately to get the regulatory rigor, you need to demonstrate validity. In other words, not only safety, but the efficacy. You have heard about some phase 3 trials that are ongoing or already completed worldwide in this space as one pivotal element in that regard. But also the utility. In other words, does this therapy truly change outcomes for patients as the ultimate rigor? But the important thing to think of regenerative medicine is really a unique opportunity to advance the practice. So it's an advancing practice paradigm that it's also iterative. So as we learn from one generation of patient solutions, it gives us the opportunity to build a next generation of solutions with what we have learned from the first one, what works, what doesn't work. So we see that as an iterative, science-driven practice advancement paradigm, and that's really how we are driving it, again, across specialties without trying to too much centralize it. The centralization comes more as a concept of facilitating resource allocation, but ultimately enabling all specialties to drive the next chapter of medicine.
That's really important, especially the iterative nature. Now, in spite of all the promising research and efforts by your institutions, we still have very few therapies that are actually approved in treating patients. So where are stakeholders not currently aligned? And Randy, I'll ask you this time to lead us off, but Andre, please add your views. What do you guys see as the biggest hurdles to getting these therapies to patients?
That panel we just had, the one before this, it's without question. We were stunned. We did, and I don't mean like the panel, let me be clear. The panel wasn't the problem, but they were talking about it very well. We did, as part of our strategic planning process, we did a survey of various stakeholders, and we have obviously a very diverse group of stakeholders out in California. And it was shocking to us. We asked the question, what's the single biggest impediment to getting a cell therapy into the hands of patients? 70% of the respondents cited the Food and Drug Administration. 70%, and it was across all lines, patients, academics, industry, all lines cited it. It was so striking to us that while we were collecting this information, going through the strategic planning process, we actually put it in as a full third of our strategic plan. The state of California now has to help enact regulatory reform, particularly for cell therapies. And the scoreboard doesn't lie on this one. We've had the current regulatory paradigm in place for 15 years, and there is a 0 on it for stem cells. So, and there's nothing that's that close either. And so it's a big problem for everyone that's in it, but it's probably a bigger problem for all of those people that are sitting on the sidelines saying there's no way we're going to invest our capital and our time into that paradigm because of the uncertainty and the complexity and the cost and all of the other issues that go along with it. It needs to get fixed. If it gets fixed, it will have a dramatic influence in the number of new therapies that will be developed.
Interesting. Andre, do you have any thoughts on that, and what do you see as the biggest challenges?
Clearly, as Randy has recognized, and actually we work very closely with Randy and many in the room. Janet is here from the Bipartisan Policy Center. Ed is hiding there a little bit further up. But I think we have had very unique opportunities in driving the regulatory field, but there are clearly other domains. I think one key domain is how do you take these very promising technologies and make them accessible to patients. And one key element for us is standardization and scalability. So the S square is a big area of field. How do you standardize things among specialties? How do you scale them up? So Mayo Clinic believes that in many of these fields, although we are a huge organization, we see 1.5 million patients every year, we clearly need to enable each of our patients to have access to this technology. So we are partnering with other groups in ensuring that we do it the right way, including with industry. So the main aspect here is the industrialization of the regenerative concepts. And in this regard, the manufacturing of regenerative products becomes very, very critical. It's also critical not to be linked to a singular platform. So the field evolved very rapidly, so we're very agnostic to the regenerative technologies. You have heard cell therapies as a dominant element, but also other domains, tissue engineering, or even one day having regeneration without the cell component. The cellular regeneration will be a dominant event. So these are some of the key topics as we go forward.
That's really helpful. Andre, what do you are we at a point right now where even if these therapies were approved, for example, for heart failure with CIRM, but really you can think about almost any indication, are we at a point right now where we could actually treat these patients in terms of manufacturing these regenerative medicines?
No, thank you for bringing our experience with phase 3 trials. So this is maybe an important element to also highlight the international community working together on this. So we will have never been able to move this field so fast if this was not done in this particular case in a transatlantic way and trans-Pacific way as well. So I think we have learned from our European colleagues, we have learned from our colleagues in Asia, and I think the regulatory also blueprints that are developed in those continents are also very, very useful. Manufacturing-wise, we have relied on manufacturing within Europe, actually. So products developed here were very useful for us. But everything is built at the clinical trial level. It has not yet been built for truly daily use and massive use. And this will be the next, I think, critical transition and potentially an inflection further point as the field evolves.
Well, you know, it makes me think back to antibody therapies. And really, when this new technology, antibodies, came out, people questioned how we were going to be able to make these cost effectively. Now they represent, I think, at least half of the top 10 therapies that are sold globally. So, you know, it really shows you that I think technological innovation can start to address some of these manufacturing issues. Randy, is there anything that you guys have been doing at CIRM to address manufacturing from the investment side or helping companies advance that?
No. No, I'm joking.
Fastest answer.
Yeah, we spend a fair amount of money on that, particularly as we have programs that are in the earliest phases of discovery through translation and into clinical trial, and the further along it gets into the clinical trial stage, obviously the more we care about it being as compliant as it possibly can with good manufacturing practices that the FDA puts in, because we want to see the drug ultimately get approved, and that is an important part of that. Interestingly, though, we've just launching a brand new program, which I think might be one of the neatest things we end up doing at CIRM. We call it the pitching machine, and that might become apparent later, and that might not. But the analogy is a sort of two counter-rotating wheels that can make something that gets put inside it go a lot faster. What we've done is we've noticed, particularly because we have a lot of our applicants are academic, and they're not that sophisticated from a regulatory standpoint. They're not used to filing INDs and GMP compliant and all of this other stuff. And so we're setting up two institutions that will work together. One of them will help them do all of their regulatorily required work in order to get an IND. So all of the stability studies and the farm tox and all this kind of boring stuff that no one really wants to do, and that the FDA wants to see done exactly their way and not a little bit differently. We'll have that organization do that. And we're also setting up a stem cell specific CRO that all they will do is help these investigators compile their INDs, get their INDs quickly, and get their trials done efficiently. So and that'll include different parts of scale up of manufacturing and the like. So that we're very confident that those two pieces will significantly increase our translational phase, which right now is at 8 years for a stem cell therapy to go from discovery into its first phase 1 trial. The industry average, just for comparison, for a small molecule or a pill is 3.2 years. So we have a lot of work to do in order to get that sped up, and so we hope the pitching machine will do it.
Interesting. I think that'll be very important, especially as the data comes out and we do start to align the regulatory agencies and get these drugs approved so that we can actually make them to treat patients. So I want to spend some time talking about really what's one of the most charged topics. It's been brought up several times at this conference, both in the United States, here in Europe too, certainly drug pricing. According to an IMS report out this month, spending on medicines in the U.S. increased by double digits for the second year in a row in 2015. And reached $425 billion based on invoice pricing. Now that figure actually looks a little bit worse than it is, because after adjusting for rebates and other price concessions by manufacturers, which did increase significantly last year, net spending was about $310 billion, or up 8.5% over 2014. One thing that's interesting to note is that the surge of new medicines remains very strong, and the use of recently launched branded remains at all-time highs. So specialty drug pricing within that two orphan diseases, certain things like that, reached $121 billion on a net price basis, and that was up 15%. So this seems to be one of the areas where a key stakeholder may not be exactly in alignment. And I want to ask our panelists, is this spending growth sustainable? But also, do these numbers really paint the full picture? And how are these new therapies creating value to the overall healthcare system and society?
So as you mentioned, the key element is that the health economics of the regenerative model of care has not been really built out. So we know very little about the true economic dimension of regenerative medicine. I think the assumption that has been made is as regenerative medicine has evolved, it has primarily targeted lifelong conditions, often life-threatening conditions. So with the aging of the population, with the pandemic of chronic diseases, it has been viewed as a critical core domain of the future of healthcare, as it will be addressing the unmet needs of an increasingly aging population with a burden of degenerative diseases. And the main premise is that a regenerative intervention essentially delays or even avoids more drastic interventions, such as, let's say, transplant. And so the best economic, at least, understandings of regenerative medicine have been in the domain of comparative effectiveness versus established principles, let's say, of transplant medicine, that, as we know, it costs, let's say, $1 million to support a patient with heart transplant in the first years related to the transplantation. So any intervention that will be able to diminish that load will obviously be very forthcoming in that context. But I think what is clearly needed is a much more robust understanding of the true economics of this field, for this field to fully be implemented.
Randy, do you have any thoughts on that? And one thing I heard Andre say that's actually very interesting too is it's not just about comparative effectiveness. There's quality of life issues. There's maybe the ability to treat more patients than ever before. So how does this all sort of factor into the value that can be added from regenerative medicine therapies?
Yeah, you know, I tend to think about it like this. People want drugs to have three things. They want them to be fast. They want them now. They want them to be perfect, and they want them to be cheap. And you can have any two, but you can't have all three because they oppose each other. And that's the inherent trade-offs that we have to we have to decide what we want to do. We are in a time where we have the technological ability to build massively expensive drugs. It is true we could build them cheaper. One of the reasons that for us time is so important. Every extra year a drug is in development, it piles on $250 million in costs to that drug. Cut 4 years out of the development time, you've cut $1 billion out of the development of a drug. $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and it starts adding up a little bit. But it is a difficult problem because we have the technological ability to do this, and there are people that have very real medical needs. They're not faking it, and you know, it's difficult when you have the ability to bridge that gap. It's a difficult thing to say, we're not going to do it because it costs too much.
I think the field also will benefit from technological advances. I think that today we are still in the initial solutions that regenerative technology and regenerative science are building, but these technologies, as they advance, the costs will clearly decrease, and increasingly the imperative is actually to develop viable and sustainable models. So I think the future is bright in that domain, but clearly for highly developed countries, the imperative is to ensure that these technologies are broadly accessible across the globe, because those are global issues and they're not national issues in any way.
So, you know, it's interesting to me because I deal with this a lot and certainly see the impact both to companies and also from a stock market basis. But I think drug pricing is actually a very easy target because of the profit at big pharma companies and biotech companies. But there really are key other areas where we can implement cost savings, fraud, you know, really getting therapies only to patients who need them. So there's really a lot of opportunities, I think, to take costs out of the entire system. So we've got just about a minute left. With all of the progress that's taking place in the field, it's clear to me that we do need greater alignment and increased collaboration to get these regenerative medicine therapies. I'll ask you guys to leave us with a final thought. Is there one key area where we need to improve alignment, or what's your general thought to leave with the audience?
You know, the cost-saving, life-changing, injectable Totalme is coming. The FDA is going to fight it. Payers aren't going to want to pay for it. Lawyers are going to sue us over it. But it will change people's lives. And it's just an example of those kinds of great breakthroughs that regenerative medicine can offer that really other kinds of therapies can't have it. But I don't think it's going to be a smooth ride. Not to be a real bummer.
A lot of work to do. Andre?
It's clearly a transformative moment. I think we can feel it. It's very palpable in this room in the last 2 days, the different presentations. It's also a community effort. I think one way to maybe summarize it is to paraphrase President Obama in the White House just early in his first days in the administration leading the United States. He had the biomedical community assembled and challenged basically the biomedical community by saying, I would like you to eliminate 2 words from the lexicon: incurable and terminal. So this concept that the society is expecting very much from regenerative medicine is very present today, and we're on our journey to eliminate those 2 words and make incurable curable, and terminal no longer a life-threatening condition. Thank you very much.
I think that's a great goal. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Sir.
And it's my pleasure to invite Katie back to the stage.